We talked in the aftermath of the initial college football playoff rankings a week ago that BYU simply had to control the controllable, and that meant winning football games. Well, the College Football Playoff Committee finally rewarded BYU after their win over Utah this week, and it goes to show good things come to those who wait.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. And as always, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege and save yourself $20 off your first purchase. All right, let's talk BYU and their national ranking. The Cougars checked in this latest edition of the College Football Playoff rankings at number 6. Yes, moving up 3 spots. And as I said in the open, I think finally BYU's right where I believe they should be. I thought they should have been in this slot a week ago. To argue that Miami, who was undefeated and didn't have necessarily the resume I thought that BYU had, was at 4. Well, how the mighty have fallen, because Miami tumbled down, Georgia tumbled as well, and BYU and Indiana were the biggest movers, I guess the biggest, not movers, but the biggest, I guess, recipients of those losses as they moved up into the rankings, passing Tennessee crazily enough. And now BYU is at number 6 in the national rankings. I said last week when BYU was ranked number 9 that I felt it was low, but I talked about the fact that I believe that the College Football Playoff Committee would come to their senses. The whole argument of eyeball test, that type of stuff. I think the committee realized that they made a major faux pas by putting their proverbial foot in their mouth with those comments. Well, after BYU goes and beats their arch rival Utah, and Utah has a pretty strong reputation nationally of late, despite their, let's be honest, a brutal season for the Utes. If you missed it, by the way, Brandon Rose, who started against BYU, is out for the season. Crazy stuff. They're down to 2 quarterbacks up on the hill, but that's beside the point. But BYU checks in at number 6 in the rankings. I'm going to throw up an overlay here. I took this screenshot off of the ESPN program, so pardon if it doesn't necessarily render all that great. I think it should pull through on YouTube pretty well here, so let's throw that up. But the bigger point to be made here is that BYU checks in as the number 3 seed in the rankings. Remember last week, they were the highest ranked Big 12 team, so therefore they were the 4 seed. Well, Miami tumbled all the way to 9, dropping into the spot BYU had last week. They're now the 4 seed. So BYU is at the 3 seed and is, in theory, with the current setup, thought to be setting up to play either Penn State or Ole Miss. You can guarantee that I am salivating at the thought of BYU taking on Jackson Dart and the Ole Miss Rebels. Remember, Jackson Dart, kid from Roy High School, and obviously spent a year at Corner Canyon before going to USC and ultimately transferring to Ole Miss. And despite going to USC and Ole Miss, was in the mix both times, potentially join the BYU football program, and ultimately never transpired that he would end up with the Cougars. But really, really cool to consider that storyline. If they were, speaking of Ole Miss, to upset Penn State and Happy Valley, and funny enough that Happy Valley exists in State College, Pennsylvania, when we call Utah Valley Happy Valley here in Utah, but they were to pull off that upset of Penn State, you could have Jackson Dart and the BYU Cougars squaring off. That is a storyline I can absolutely get on board with. But the bigger story to be had here is BYU is being rewarded for what they are doing. They're 9-0. There are a few 8-1 teams in front of them, as you see: Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Indiana, then BYU. As I mentioned, Ohio State, Texas, and Penn State all have 1 loss, but that doesn't necessarily drive me all that crazy, because I still believe, should BYU continue to handle their business, they got 3 games to go here. Let's say they do run the table and they're 12-0 going into that Big 12 title game. I don't care if BYU wins or loses that title game. I think at that point, BYU's all but locked in as at worst an at-large team, because sitting in the 6th spot right now, it's going to be harder and harder for the committee to justify dropping BYU out of the rankings unless they fall flat on their face and lose a game or potentially 2 at least, I feel like. So, yeah, the storyline, similar to last week, is BYU, keep doing your thing. but I am appreciative to the College Football Playoff Committee for rewarding BYU. And this is what they had to say when asked by a reporter about Tennessee in particular, but as to why BYU and Indiana passed up Tennessee. He said this: I can say no to the injury to Tennessee's quarterback. Speaking of Nico Iamaleava, I had nothing to do with it. It really came down to the play last week of both Indiana and BYU, both winning big games on their schedule. Crazily enough, probably two of the toughest wins these two programs have had, and maybe their least impressive performances, if you want to go by that quote-unquote eyeball test. Because remember, Tennessee had to scrape past a middling Michigan squad 20-15, and BYU escaped by the skin of their teeth from Utah 22-21. But he also said this: Ward Manuel, who funny enough is Michigan's AD, so it's kind of a crazy thing. But he says this: Tennessee, the offense has struggled some in the second half of the year, not being consistent early in the year. And we just felt as a committee at this time, Indiana has been playing well, a close win against Michigan. But other than that, they've dominated everyone they have played. BYU obviously undefeated, 2 wins against the top 25. Finally, they recognize that BYU's got 2 quality wins at SMU and against Kansas State. And in looking at that, as we assessed all the teams, we just felt that Indiana and BYU earned the 5 and 6 slot, and Tennessee stayed where they are. Unquote. That's a mark of respect, I think, from the committee. So essentially, in my mind, and this is just me speaking, so I don't speak for anybody. I don't proclaim to speak for anybody. I believe the College Football Playoff Committee course corrected and realized, you know what? BYU is a little bit better than we probably gave them credit for a week ago. And once again, if the Cougars keep winning, that means beating Kansas this Saturday night against an upstart Jayhawks squad, which tomorrow, by the way, will be joined by Derek Johnson, host of Locked On Jayhawks, for a crossover edition to talk about Kansas. So stay tuned for that on tomorrow's show here on the podcast feeds or on YouTube. But if you keep doing your thing, speaking of BYU, they are going to live the dream that all of us in our wildest dreams, quite literally coming into the season, I don't think any of us could have envisioned. Think about this. BYU's ranked higher than Georgia and Alabama, folks. They're ranked higher than Miami. BYU's knocking on the door of the top 5 in the entire country. Let that sink in just for a minute, everybody. I'm going to throw that back up there and let you look at that. BYU is just a stitch away. Let's say Indiana loses one. BYU is going to move up past them. Penn State, Texas, Ohio State, they lose again. Guess what? You're going to have an opportunity to move up. Everything. I mean, everything is there to play for BYU. And the nice part is, I don't think the BYU Cougars even give a you-know-what about where they're ranked right now. They'll probably take a look at it and say, that's cool and all, but they know the job is not done. They've got 3 more games to really go out and prove themselves on a national stage. And so long as they keep winning, BYU is going to keep moving up in those rankings. And what are we talking about this team being potentially going into that playoff if they finish the season 12-0 at this juncture? Are they 3? Are they 2? Are they 4? Where are they in those rankings? Everything, and I mean everything, is there for BYU, and it's all in front of them. It's all within their control. That's the best part about this, is everything. BYU's not having to rely on anything. And the nice part about the playoff in this day and age, it's based on merit, not popularity. I love that fact. And if BYU handles their business, that merit will get them a top 4 seed and a pretty favorable draw to potentially advance to a semifinal and potentially a national championship. And I know there's going to be a lot of naysayers out there saying that BYU is going to fall flat on their face in the playoff. Well, guess what? They made the playoff. That would be reward enough in my mind, but I obviously would like to see them make a run along with that. All right, coming up next, a guy that's played, I think, an underrated role in BYU's success, particularly on defense. He is coaching up one of the units I think is maybe the most improved in all the BYU football program. We'll talk with him about that next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Now, Game Time is here for you guys to get you out to the college sporting events or just sporting events in general you're interested in going to. If it's not sports, comedy, theater events. You want to go to a concert, your favorite musician or bands coming to town, Game Time Picks has got all the features for you guys. And the best part is it makes getting your tickets to see your favorite teams and or other events as simple as possible. It filters out all the fluff. You're showing only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of other tickets to find the right option for you guys. Also inside the app, you'll see Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. They've got job loss protection, money back guarantee, guarantees. They've got everything, and they've thought about it all to make sure that you as the consumer are protected to the highest level they possibly can afford to protect you guys. So take the guesswork out of buying your tickets and do it with our friends at Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account, redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. Hope you guys are all doing fantastic on this Wednesday, and hope you're all having a fantastic day once again. All right. The BYU linebacking core has been, I think, an absolute revelation. It's crazy to think that we are back to where BYU was a season ago when I believe the season went off the rails. Remember, BYU traveled to Lawrence, Kansas, and I made that trek along with many of you out there to Lawrence to watch their first ever Big 12 game in program history. Well, a year and change later, BYU welcomes the Kansas Jayhawks to Provo, Utah this Saturday night. Remember, last year, there was a major injury. Ben Bywater runs off the field holding his shoulder, and who knew? Any of us, who really knew that was going to essentially end what I believe the high water mark for BYU in 2023. Things kind of devolved from there. Now, he wasn't the only person that caused BYU's issues, but his injury and subsequent having to force him to retire as a BYU football player, brutal deal for the BYU Cougars. The nice part is this year, BYU has got three linebackers in particular who I think are absolutely killing it. And Justin Ena is a big reason why as their position coach. He also has taken on a bigger role with Jay Hill dealing with some of the lingering concerns with regards to his heart and the heart attack he suffered earlier this season. Well, he revealed that Justin Ena is essentially his, I don't mean this to be derogatory, messenger when it comes to halftime discussions. But without further ado, here's my conversation earlier this week with Justin Ena, BYU linebackers coach, because he had a lot to say about what he's doing to help the program and, more importantly, get his guys in the right mindset as they go off to face. They go off Saturday night, hopefully, when they take on the Kansas Jayhawks. The Utah game means a lot to a lot of guys in this football program, and I know you played in that game.
Yes.
What were your emotions after that all went down?
You know, it was a hard-fought battle. Mm-hmm. I think both sides really gave everything they got. And again, I don't remember many holy wars that ended in a blowout. So you knew it was going to be tough.
Yeah.
You knew you were going to get their best shot. We were going to give ours, and luckily we were able to become victorious and finish with 3 seconds left with that field goal. It was a big time.
I know as a defensive coach, you're sitting in the box. So I know you're up in the box with
Yes.
Jay and everything. As you're watching that unfold, like, are you kind of waiting and just got all tense for the moment? Like, what was your emotions as that all kind of was going down?
You know, a lot of the time is just you're still prepping.
Okay, so right? you're still on your defensive mindset.
Yeah, so you're still thinking defensive mindset.
Okay.
I mean, you're watching the ball move and you're seeing some really good things occurring, and you're like, all right, let's just keep sustaining that drive, you know. But you're also making sure, like, if you score, all right, you better be ready for 2-minute offense. So you're thinking more defensively than anything else.
Okay.
Now, when they start eating the clock more, you know, now you can start turning to the offense and then special teams, and you start saying, all right, looks like we're going to be kicking a field goal, then you know the setup, and then you're just watching to see that kick just come off that guy's Will's foot, and Will's tremendous.
Yeah.
What a great kick.
Well, I was gonna say, so it's all business until that kick essentially goes through.
Oh yes. Okay. Oh yes. Hey, when it does go through, we're celebrating just as any fan would be in that crowd as well, though.
Got it. Now, obviously, these two programs are interconnected. I know you worked at Utah for a time. What's it like going from the player side of it to being on the coaching side of it?
You know, it is kind of strange. At first, when I made that transition, being a Cougar, an alum here, and then hiring up there to be a linebackers coach and a special teams coach, it was kind of rough at first, right?
Yeah.
But you also know, I mean, you have Kyle in there, you got Freddie, you got other guys. Kalani's done it. I mean, there's guys that have done it.
Jay's done this.
Yeah, and Jay's flipped vice versa on the other, along with Sione. So it's a paycheck, and then it's also making sure that you're still doing all you can to make sure you get your wins for the team that you're coaching for. And so I love my time over at Utah. I learned from some of the best. I mean, Coach Whittingham is a linebacker expert, and I learned a ton from him that I keep on carrying to this day. And so it was a blessing for me I talked to him before the game, and I just wanted to show him gratitude and said, Coach, I appreciate all you did for me, because he's done a lot for all of us.
Sure, yeah.
And so he's a hell of a coach. He's a great man, and I just wanted to make sure he knew that I was grateful for him.
Now, I learned something from Coordinator's Corner this week that Jay actually doesn't go down to the locker room at halftime, and I was surprised to hear him say that. But he said he sends you with instructions down there.
Yeah.
Is that like notes? He's like just written down, said, "Hey, take this with you."
No, he does. He does.
Okay.
So I take him down there. We meet together as a staff with Kalani.
Got it. Okay.
And we go through those, and then I don't want to step my overbounds, and then I just make sure that every position coach, I just relay what Jay tells me.
Got it. So you're passing those notes to those guys.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then we have some of the greatest assistant coaches in college football as well. So they know how to do their business, and we just make sure we get that point across. And however we express it might be different ways. Shione might be a little bit different than me, but it's a good thing.
Okay, so are these like handwritten, like he's writing this during the game, or is these like text messages?
No. These are handwritten.
Okay,
so he'll talk to me right before halftime, and then it'll be written down, and then I go down there. And it's not like anything like too mind-blowing, right?
Okay,
Just make sure that you play assignment sound.
Sure.
I mean, the second quarter of the last game was horrendous for us.
Yeah.
We played bad football. They scored 21 points.
Yeah.
And so I think it was just, hey, be assignment sound, go back to fundamentals, and just play harder and more sound, and you'll be fine.
I just have this idea of him like scribbling notes and like calling plays at the same time. It's just a baffling idea to me. But that's the mindset of a defensive coordinator. You have to be able to do multiple things all at once. You've been in that chair before.
Yeah, and Jay's the best I've ever been around.
Okay.
Jay does it the right way, and Jay's very, very calm too, which I love. And it's nice having him in the box. I don't know if he likes being in the box, but it's fun having him in there, because I think half the time he calls me down too as well. So he calls it boring. I love being up there. It takes a little bit of that emotion away from me, which I love.
Okay.
He's probably a little bit more level-headed, so he probably can be down there and still make sure he calls it as smooth as possible. But I've learned a ton from him, not only down on the field like last year, but also up in the box this year.
Now, moving on to the field, I want to talk about your main three guys. Speaking of Harrison, Isaiah, and Jack, what has made them so effective as a trio out there?
They trust each other, and so it's always making sure that you do your 111th, right? And you bring everything together. And when you can really put them all in and have them kind of showcase their strengths and their weaknesses. And again, their strengths are really, really good. So you got really good speed by all three of them. But they're all so different in a lot of ways too. You got a 6'5" guy, you got a 6'2" guy, and you got a 6-footer. And they all can run really, really well. But they're also made, interiorly, Harry's great because he's low leverage. He can make inside plays, and he can bring his feet, but he can still track it from inside out. You have Glasker that can come off the edge like no other. And then you also have Jack that's probably one of the best pass rushers in the way he bends his hips. That's why I think we've done a pretty good job of making sure we got in the backfield when we are blitzing.
Now, the Kansas game last year is the game you lost Ben Bywater. I think there were so many questions after you lost him going through last year, and even during this offseason. Okay, who steps into his role? And Harrison, I think a lot of people are like, okay, we'll see what he can do, but he's made that position his own. What has caused him to be able to lock that down?
With Harry's a constant professional.
Okay.
He's a perfectionist in a lot of ways, and I just talked to him just today, and he's like, I wanted a better Tuesday. I said, dude, you're playing a really good offense that has triple option forms to it. Hey, you're doing pretty good. It's not ever going to be perfect. And a lot of guys want it to be perfect, right? And so it's making sure you build until game day. And then game day, if you're grading out at 85, 90, 95%, you're doing a pretty good job, especially with this offense.
Coach Grimes was here. He's been here in 2 different stints. I know that he knows this offense. He's got institutional knowledge of BYU.
Yeah.
You looking forward to matching wits with him?
I really am. You see a lot of the flair, I know, with A-Rod, with some of his stuff. You see the fly sweep. You see a lot of movements. You see a lot of people that are conflicted, right? So you'll have one of the part of the offensive line going this way, the other offensive line going the other way. You got a ball going and redirecting all that stuff. It's really good for us because we have to make sure that we're super disciplined with our eyes, complete eye control when we're doing the triple option part of it. But also there's enough counters and then the back going opposite way as well. So we have to just make sure that we're assignment sound, that we do our job. And again, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in front of us, right? You got to decipher all of it, and then when the ball presents itself, you make the play.
You guys are one of the few teams Jalon Daniels actually played against last year due to his injuries. So does that help you have an idea of what you're going up against, having actually seen him in action?
He's a great quarterback, and not only as a runner, but he's a prolific passer.
Yes.
I mean, you see him over and over again hitting from the backside hash, a 15-yard out, all the way to the sideline on a rope.
Yeah.
And so he has that arm strength. He's a really, really good football player. And then he's also very calm. So you see the pocket presence of him. He's a lot like Noah Fafita. The way he moves in the pocket, he doesn't want to buy time. The one thing that he's a little bit different is he's faster. He'll take off on the run where Noah is thinking more pass first. So the way he's elusive in the pocket is awesome. But he's also a great runner when he decides to run the ball because he's a pure athlete.
Devin Neal, I think, is their now all-time leading rusher. He's kind of the complement. Now, they got two really good running backs, but Neal's kind of the lead guy. What does that do to your linebackers, knowing that, okay, you got a running back who can take off on you, and these two running backs are going to bring it downhill on you all the time?
Well, that's when you go right back to assignment sound football, right? Okay. So you treat it kind of like triple option ball.
Got it, okay.
As much as you can.
Yeah.
You do your job. Again, you're always playing the dive to quarterback the pitch. And the phases are really, really good at what they do. Now, you still got your gap schemes, but it's always just making sure that you're doing your job.
There you go, Justin Ena, BYU linebackers coach, and it's cool to hear him talk about what he is doing to help this program, and more importantly, what he believes his players are capable of. But he knows the challenge. Jalon Daniels, Devin Neal, the offense for Kansas that carved BYU up good last year in Lawrence. Well, a lot of it's back together, if not the majority of it. So BYU is wary of what they're going into, but also I think that they're excited for some payback potential. Now, the good news, I will also add this, is out of practice yesterday. I did see our guy Connor Pay wearing cleats in pads practicing. Our boy is back and excited to see him back on the field this Saturday when BYU takes on the Jayhawks. But once again, a big thank you to Coach Ena for his comments, and it's cool to hear him talk about what he's doing at halftime as Jay Hill stays in the press box. He's helping out in that regard, but also coaching up a very, very talented linebacker core for the Cougars. All right, we'll finish out today's show with another football thought I've been kind of harboring. I've been debating if it's the right time to bring this up, but what the heck? Let's talk about it anyways. We'll roll with that next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action this season with our friends at FanDuel, as they are America's #1 sportsbook. Once again, right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Simple as that. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything to place your live bets on the NFL all in one place. The best part is when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you believe something can help you out, you want to go take advantage of it, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. It's as simple as that. You cannot get much more simple than that. It's FanDuel.com to get started today. So never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. And thank you for being everydayers with us here. If you have not done so already, be an ultra everydayer, I guess, in a way, and join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Get the inside scoop on all things BYU sports. I'm passing it along to you guys via text messages. So if you guys want to be a part of it, join us today. The link is in the show notes below. You get a 14-day free trial and just $5 a month afterwards in terms of what it costs you to be a part of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, and hope that many more of you will be joining us in the coming days or weeks. Or if you've joined and maybe decided to step away, come back. We've had a few people drop off over the months, but if you want to get back in line, you can do that. And I would love for you guys to be a part of it once again. All right, let's talk about BYU and their status in the Big 12. After BYU beat Utah, and we had this conversation on my radio show, DJ and PK on the KSL Sports Zone. I'm the executive producer of that fine program. And DJ and PK brought up, is there a changing of the guard, and essentially asking the question, are the BYU Cougars poised to pass the University of Utah in terms of their place in the college football, or college football in particular, but college athletics universe? And I'm not going to lie, I believe they are. Now, a lot of people think I'm biased for saying this because I do a BYU-centric podcast. I get that. I get it comes with a built-in bias for some people out there. But let me just reiterate one thing that I have harbored for many, many years. When BYU went independent back in 2010, they made that announcement, and obviously 2011 was their first season as an independent football program. They did the moves that they did, putting their other sports in the West Coast Conference or MPSF, depending on which sport it was. The whole idea was eventually to end up where they're at today, and that is being a part of the big time, the Power Four, as it is currently constituted today. The BYU football program is ranked 6th in the country, and it's crazy to consider where they were a season ago and where they're at right now. Because remember, last year this time, we were in November, and BYU was going to West Virginia getting absolutely boat raced. It just crazy stuff has happened in 365 days, give or take a few. The bigger point to be made here is there were many out there, and I talked with people who are in the college sports industry who believe that when and if BYU got into the club, to use that expression, a part of what was then the Power Five, and now the Power Four ranks, they believe the Cougars will be able to compete with almost anybody because of what BYU is all about. Now, what is BYU all about? Well, they are a church-affiliated university, obviously proud to represent the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's bar none. That's number one thing that BYU does. Look at that video, the cut that BYU put out in that minute-long plus a statement from Kalani Sitake talking about Helaman 512 and the foundation and how it applies to football. This is incredible how he is melding the program and also infusing it with the faith elements that are obviously eternal truths as we understand them and how it impacts BYU football. And obviously it's playing off extremely well this year. The whole thought was from a lot of people was once BYU had the funding, the other programs that they aspired to be alongside, they would absolutely be able to compete at that level. And that's happening. Now, the crazy thing is BYU's not even fully funded yet. They're not a fully, quote, vested member. They're not a full share, as some Utah fans like to throw in the face of Cougar fans, member of the Big 12 Conference quite yet. Who cares? BYU is making more money than they ever made before as an athletics department. They are hauling in more money than they ever have before. And I don't think that is coincidental with what BYU is doing in terms of upgrading their facilities, being a player in the NIL sphere with their donors, and just the overall rise of BYU athletics. Think about it. BYU football is in the top 10 in the country, knocking on the door of the top 5. BYU basketball, they're already getting votes in the top 25 polls. And if they do what Kevin Young aspires to do, they're going to become a Leviathan in the college basketball ranks. And that doesn't even discount what already the cross country, track and field, women's soccer, the volleyball programs, who are all nationally caliber programs. This is the era for BYU, I think, to enter what I believe could be a heyday for them. Is it going to come to fruition? TBD. But I really do think that BYU is poised to really make inroads to being the premier program, not only in the state, but one of the premier programs in the Big 12. What I love is I talked about the NIL sphere. Well, there's NIL contributions coming from all over the place, and you can claim it's just Ryan Smith for some people out there to make it simplistic. It's not just Ryan Smith. In fact, I would say that there are bigger power players in the NIL sphere for BYU than Ryan Smith, and that may be saying something, but I really do think that there are other quote-unquote nameless, faceless donors out there who are contributing more heavily than Ryan Smith is to NIL, but that does not even absolve what they're contributing, I guess, to the athletics department themselves. As I understand it, donations have come in droves for BYU now that they're in the Big 12 Conference. That happened way back in 2021, September 10th, when BYU announced they had officially accepted their entrance into the Big 12 Conference. Cougar fans, and we're talking the Cougar fans who have the means to do so, are putting up and putting money where their mouth is to help BYU do what they're doing. There's going to be some of you saying, well, cite specific examples, Jake. It's not my place to do that. But I can assure you, based on the conversations I've had with folks in and around BYU, that money is coming in at an astronomical clip, unprecedented clip for, I guess, a more appropriate term. And BYU, so long as they continue to, I think, stick to their mission and understand that with strategic investments here and there and not trying to do wholesale changes, things are looking up for the future of BYU sports, in particular BYU football, BYU basketball. But I think the overall BYU athletic department, they're going to become what many hated during their eras of the WAC and the Mountain West when they were the dominant force in the league. I believe that can happen in the Big 12, and I think that the early returns for BYU are that they can absolutely pull this off. It will take work. It will take added investment. It will take all of Cougar Nation, both literally and figuratively, to bind together to pull it off, because you got to have the ball bounce your way. And so far this year in football, it's bounced BYU's way. There's zero doubt about that. But I think the concerns that some had about BYU, and in the case of what I'm thinking of, Utah being wary of BYU getting to their level, well, they're absolutely well-founded, because BYU is showing what they're capable of. And I like I said, it's very early, and I debated if I really wanted to broach this topic at this point, but why not? I really think BYU is on a good trajectory right here, and I hope that they can go out and become a force in college athletics once again, but this time do it at the highest levels. Now, maybe there's a day that changes in the Power 2, as we talk about sometimes at the Big Ten and the SEC. They yank control away, and BYU's on the outside looking in once again. So be it. But until that day, keep doing your thing. Chase the dreams that BYU fans for generations have had. I can tell you, my grandfather, my dad, myself have all harbored watching BYU do what they're doing this very season in football. I wasn't alive for 1984. My dad and my grandpa were, and they still talked, in the case of my grandpa, talked about it till the day he died. My dad still talks about it to this day. It's an important thing. It's a hallmark in a lot of sports fans' minds when a team wins a championship, and that happened 40 years ago for BYU football. 40 years on, could it happen again? Well, the door is wide open for BYU to do that. And if they continue to do their thing and continue to handle their business both on and off the field or whatever sporting venue surface you want to talk about, I think the Cougars, they are absolutely in a good spot to become a major force in college athletics, if not the Big 12. So it's an exciting time. So if you're holding on BYU for whatever reason, buy in, because I think this is a good time as any. It's the best time, quite frankly, to buy in, to go all in or buy all in with the BYU Cougars. And I'm excited to see what the future holds, because I do think it can be really, really exciting. All right, that'll do it for this edition of the show. I will step off my soapbox now, but big thank you to all of you, as always, for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. If you're going out to the Queens game tonight, BYU basketball in action at the Marriott Center, I will be there. If you want to come over to Media Row, if you see me wandering around, please don't hesitate to reach out and say hello. I always will take a minute to chat with you guys. It's one of my favorite things to do when I'm out in the wild talking with all y'all. So please stop me if you see me out there. But in the meantime, thank you for joining us once again. We'll have a crossover edition tomorrow, talking all things BYU and Kansas, Locked On Jayhawks. That's tomorrow right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.